Well, hello, ladies and gents. Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, and today we're doing another AMA video. This one is brought to us by Josh, and it's all about what do you do when you've got a crazy schedule? What do you do with your training? What do you do with your sleep? What do you do with your nutrition? So, before we dive into that, let's roll the intro. All right, so Josh asks, hello, Robert. Absolutely love your content, your bricks, and your outlook on life. Appreciate you, Josh. I've been following a ketogenic carnivore nutrition approach for about 2 years. My work has me traveling and working all hours of the day, all week long. He's a train engineer. Needless to say, I live out of a duffel bag and Tupperware all week. My question is this. With regards to not having a steady sleep, eating, or training schedule due to the nature of my career, what's the best way to manipulate macros and micros to best serve my body and mind? Some days I train, some days I don't. Some days I sleep all day, some all night. I know circadian rhythm affects ghrelin and leptin hormones, but to what extent, I'm not sure. Maybe some days titrate protein up and fat on others. Any information to help battle hunger and keep good energy and balance in my crazy life would be appreciated. Keep up the awesome work you do. Thanks. Great question, Josh. I actually used to work on the railroad. I was a train master. And I was super close to all the engineers and conductors that I worked with, so I totally understand where you're coming from with that style of work. I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was 12-hour shifts, and you'd rotate all over the place. So totally get what you're saying with regard to sleep schedule being out of whack, travel schedule being out of whack, training, everything's just total chaos. And a lot of people can relate with that, whether they're working shift work or whatever. So what do you do? What do you optimize for? How do you kind of manipulate things to get things dialed in? What I would recommend doing is control as many variables as you can, obviously. If you can't train every day, that's fine. You got to do what you can. If you can't, you could probably, you're not going to be able to optimize your sleep every day, because if you're traveling like that and you're doing a 12-hour shift and you're out of your normal routine, your sleep's going to be impacted negatively. When it comes to nutrition, I would honestly recommend staying consistent with your macros, like prepping your meals in advance for days that you know you're going to be on a 12-hour shift away from home, away from your normal routine. Still get your target macros in. A lot of people want to manipulate their nutrition quite a bit on training days versus off days, on work days versus on days. I don't really ever recommend doing that. If you can hit the macros consistently over the course of the week, even if some of those days you're sleeping more than others, if some of those days you're training more than others, if some of those days you're stressed more than others, if you can be consistent with your nutrition over that course of the week, then those changes will average out over time. So even though your sleep's going to be impacted, even though you may be hungrier some days than others, even though your training is going to be impacted, and you may be, the recovery is going to be different other days, I don't necessarily recommend trying to compensate for that by having higher protein days or higher fat days or anything like that. It's going to make controlling for the variables that you do have control over that much more difficult. So try and standardize as much as you can there. Eat the same macros every single day of the week, regardless of your training, regardless of your sleep, regardless of your work schedule, and then see what your body does in response to those macros with all that chaos, and then you can titrate your macros up or down based off of that response. So that's how I would recommend there. With regard to supplements, from a sleep standpoint, you asked about optimizing sleep and circadian rhythm. From a circadian rhythm standpoint, what I would definitely recommend doing is trying to, if you're having to sleep during the day, use blackout curtains, use a face mask to cover your eyes, use earplugs. Do as much as you can in that regard to, quote-unquote, trick your body into thinking it is nighttime if you are actually sleeping during the daytime. The worst thing is when you're trying to sleep during the day and you still have a bunch of light coming in. That's going to negatively affect the quality of your sleep. With regard to training, what I would recommend doing is try and stay as consistent with your training, even on days. I don't know what your schedule is exactly going to be like, but if you have a push-pull leg routine, for instance, and you don't know what day your work shift is going to hit or land on, try and do resistance bands or something to continue as much of a standard protocol as you can. And if you can only do body weight stuff, if you can only do resistance band stuff, then your recovery from that shouldn't be nearly as long. So if you have an off day following, you could do a traditional workouts with a gym setting in that regard. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend, again, I don't know exactly what your work schedule is like, but try and follow as much of a routine as possible, because that's going to also help with your sleep and recovery, and just getting your body more or less aligned to somewhat of a routine. So even if you're on a shift, bring some bands with you. I mean, I know when I was with the railroad, there's oftentimes the engineers and conductors would be held up on a train waiting for a train down the line to move, and you'd be stuck in that train for 6 hours at a time. So if you've got your bag, your duffel bag, and you've got your resistance bands, then, do something there. Do some push-ups. There's not a whole lot of space in those cabs, but do what you can, and try and keep as much of a schedule, as much of a routine as possible. But definitely with nutrition, I would keep that constant regardless of your training, regardless of your sleep, regardless of your work schedule. Try and keep that constant no matter what, and then let your body take that and average that over the course of the week, and then scale up or down the following week based off of the desired results you're looking for. I don't know if you're trying to gain muscle or lose body fat, but do things in weekly increments. Eat your intake consistently throughout the course of that week, and then just adjust accordingly. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to overcompensate. Like if they don't train one day, they'll not eat that much that day. If they train really hard the next day, they'll try to eat more that next day. And that makes really getting things dialed in nearly impossible. So I don't really ever recommend doing that. Just eat everything consistently over the course of the week, regardless of your training, and then let your body average out those trainings. Kind of a long-winded answer. Hopefully that sheds some light on your question. You requested some peanut butter bricks, so we will send those your way. Those will be good to have in your duffel bag as well on the train. So for anybody that does not know how these Ask Me Anythings AMA videos work, if you submit a question via the link in the description below, I will pick one of those, and if I pick your question and use it, I will send you some bricks for free with the flavor of your choosing. Thank you so much for the question, Josh. Appreciate all y'all tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.